Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Bots and Billables, where we examine the future of law. Let's dive in. Number one news this week, Legal Tech Hub publishes another publication on the future of workflows. Why do they do this? First of all, more and more companies are looking towards the workflow direction. So more and more vendors in the legal tech space are adding workflows to their products. Why do they do this? Because use cases are getting more individual, verticalized, team specific. People see the need to individualization. Workflows are a way to make features self-service. It's a way for you to not have to build the product really, because your customer will essentially build it on their own through workflow adjustments. So what is a workflow? That's the debate, because it's not always the same. There has been, of course, a wave of workflow tools in the 90s, in the 2000s, the 2010s. Lawyers like workflows because this is how they work. It's very structured, process-driven, sometimes conditional logic-driven, sometimes in a time sequence way. So workflows are inherent to the legal profession and how they work. And now with the, let's say, AI assistant companies adding workflows to their work, that makes everything even more interesting, diverse, and also changes our perception of what a workflow is. You probably know this, Brighter's a workflow company as well. We can do workflows. Nikki Shaver from Legal Technology Hub took the effort to examine what are workflows, what are agents, what are agentic workflows, what is the common denominator, what are the differences. So if you don't know what a workflow is, or you just find the topic curious and you want to see the differences, read that publication because it's good and puts it all together. I think the most important takeaway here is it depends. They're different on the context. Everything is merging together. We will have AI in workflows, but also inductive reasoning and the sort of black box reasoning of AI is getting enhanced with more conditional and, let's say, descriptive reasoning of the rule-based tools. So we basically have all directions happening at the same time. What I wanted to point out is a meticulously structured roadmap that Nikki and the team at LTH built, where they summarize how workflows came to legal. So I have a look there where they basically go back into agentic AI in the larger scheme and then who started it. So they basically go back and track the PR announcements and the interviews they did with the companies. They think that Mike Bomarito and Dan Katz were one of the first ones to do that. So kudos over there. I will mention Dan later again. So that's good. Apparently Wilson Sonsini were also amongst the first to actually think about doing that we're talking like May 2024. Brighter, we were one of the first ones to release an agentic system in our Assist. Spellbook was next. There was Luminance, of course, with Lumi. And then a number of companies raising money. Then Harvey Legore come out. Brighter Beeman comes in May as well. And then a huge number of people publishing agentic systems. So we're talking like increase in agentic stuff. LTH also has published a huge map of legal tech AI assistants this week. So have a look. It is an incredibly dense map of, I think we're now close to 100 tools. So have a look there. This is only helpful for analysts and people really scanning the market for a job. It's not an intuitive thing to read, but it's interesting to see who else made it there. Interesting read number 2 this week comes from a venture capital fund, Dawn Capital out of London, who have the question of how close are we to AI lawyers? So Dawn Capital is an investor in numerous enterprise companies. They are coming out of London and are usually good in bringing European companies into the US as well. So they have a number of successes there. They're also an investor in companies like Brighter, but they're also investors in companies that are doing agents, but not necessarily focused on legal, but regulatory. They have a number of interesting observations how LLMs basically trigger the actual value lawyers deliver. And since Dawn Capital is not a legal tech specific fund, but a horizontal enterprise SaaS and AI investor, they really explain this sort of in an almost 101 style. So if you are new to the topic or you're generously curious about what you missed, then maybe read this. Read Dawn Capital's take on how lawyers will be impacted by LLMs, because it's a quite fresh take from basically assuming you know nothing. And these are sometimes the best introductions because they take you on a journey. Quite interesting take about how much is on the table on the legal service market and how that impacts the actual everyday tasks. I will come back to this because Dawn Capital also asks, like, what do you lawyers actually do? Pretending they don't know, and to really go through this and how this can change. So it's a very like bottom-up approach that investors do sometimes to understand the market better in order to be smart in decisions that involve funding. So Dawn really dove deep into that. I recommend that you have a look. It's an insightful, and of course, like everybody who does a job there, they also create a map at the end where they draw out the most relevant players. What is interesting, and I will come back to this, is they also have a column on AI first services, which basically means like not tech coming in to support the lawyers, but also services that are being rebuilt, rethought, enhanced through AI. Remember that last episode we spoke with Tacit Legal, so here are a number of other logos on the map. Crosby, of course, from the Valley, but also Avancia from London. So have a look at the map, quite interesting. Of course, the obvious players are in there as well. You will have a good overview about how that works. So, not a summer without some hypey headlines. This one is one from just today. Fortune: AI is entering law offices and is challenging the entire legal playbook. Like, we know these headlines. It's hype times, right? So you have those headlines. Rethinking, challenging the legal playbook. We're in this, things change faster than ever, but is this going to like profoundly transverse the legal world? I don't know. I have doubts. We had a discussion about it this week. So our take on this was that it's probably somewhere in the middle, but I want to take you on a journey to discuss this with us. We have to just accept that we're living in hype times. This just came out 2 days ago, published by OpenAI themselves, by their new CEO, basically announcing and pushing the hype, how much we can actually do with AI. You have a technology that can read 1,000 times faster than all of us and can write 1,000 times faster than all of us. It can search, find, compare, summarize. It can reason 1,000 times faster than all of us. So there is a use case for that tech in legal. And if you have a technology like that, it's just a question of where is that use case and how can you bring it to play. But it's clear that this technology does something to our work. The question is, how will it play and who will benefit? And we don't know. I don't know. I don't pretend I know, but I like the discussion about that. And I think we should all think about what that means for our work in going forward. So this is where discussion starts. So I think thinking about the future of employment, especially the future of lawyers, we have to go back a little bit about all those like future of employment forecasts we're all used to. And the number one report we all have maybe read in the past or at least heard of is the Osborne-Frey Future of Employment paper. I don't know if you remember this. It came out in 2013, published by the Oxford Martin School. So these two researchers were incredibly famous for that study because the punchy summary was, and now I have to actually be sure what it was. I think it was 47%. Yes, 47% of total US employment is at risk through technology and automation. 47% of the US economy. That was like the title. So it's basically like one job in two. When this came out, this made headlines, obviously. The interesting thing about the survey was, of course, that it then went deeper and they thought about which of the jobs were impacted most, and it basically started to dig in. If you have a look at this, I think there's the stats start at page 41, where they're looking into different risk categories for different professions. And well, legal is in there and they are getting impacted. All the other jobs get impacted too. That was 2013, maybe a bit exaggerated. 2016-17, the OECD did another survey on jobs, and it was I don't want to say anything that's wrong. Like it's risk of automation comparative analysis from the OECD. There were a couple of scientists like guiding the survey, and they corrected Osborne-Frey in their report, being like, it's not going to be 47%, it's going to be 14%, 1-4. That was 2017. Turned out even that was too high. So we go from Osborne-Frey to OECD to maybe these. And the funny thing about these surveys were all like, it wasn't that harsh, and it showed that people doing research outside in miss a number of factors. Like this, the simple summary was they don't know how legal works, they don't know how some of the service sectors work, economic, geopolitical, political factors that are relevant for the job that have to be taken into consideration when thinking about how to do your job with tech. The big learning for Gen AI especially was the tech can do the things that are hard for us better than the things that are easy for us. So what is intuitive. So this is an interesting direction because all the professions that were deemed safe from automation for a while, like white collar workers, suddenly get put in question. So over the last weeks, I have had numerous conversations with people, lawyers of all seniority levels, partners, seniors, associates, legal clerks, all kinds of support staff. I spoke to big firms, small firms, medium-sized firms. I went to conferences, I went to individual clients events, I talked to customers of Brighter and Beeman, I talked to customers of other tools. The last 6 weeks were me walking through the world talking to people about that. Here's my summary so far on the question of will legal jobs be reduced or not? There's 3 big argument groups for the yes side. Argument number 1, the obvious one, efficiency. LLMs can read faster, write faster, and are now brought to work through vendors that leverage them. This will have an impact on how fast you work. This observation strongly believes that the market will not grow as much as the efficiency gets impacted. In other words, we will be way more efficient than we can actually have the pie enlarged. It's a solid argument. There are, of course, many data points that support that. I want to add, though, that we have not seen many of those efficiency gains yet. I have to say that I have seen some. I have almost every day a conversation with a law firm partner or somebody in an in-house team who points me to a use case that gets automated now. I see this every day. There are those before and after scenarios where you see how much money and time you can save. But I also see that these are often problems where people want to save the time to do something else. These are often problems where the money is not gone. The money is focused somewhere else. The attention is focused somewhere else. Many of those use cases are not the same. But I have to really admit, if you save a couple of $100K in a project, this money is gone. And you cannot make up for it easily. So that revenue is gone if you automate it. So efficiency gain is the biggest argument here. Argument number 2 is the specialization argument. It basically means we will have more people focusing on specific legal work with technology in the future. So we will have legal engineers coming in, we have legal project managers, we'll have product owners. There will be more diverse teams in the law firms and in the in-house teams, legal operations taking over and wielding the software, which means that essentially maybe the total number of people in the legal market will remain roughly the same. Maybe the market is the same or it will even be better and bigger, but the people doing the work will change. We need different skills, and that will lead to less lawyers being involved and more other roles being involved. I like that argument. I think it's solid. There are tendencies in the past that point towards that, but it's the second big argument is specialization will have an impact on the total number of lawyers we need. We need different skills. Third, the pie will shrink. That's the third argument. The market will get smaller. And it will get smaller for a number of reasons. One, people will use other tools, providers, services as a self-service basis for legal advice. Classic one, service do not pay. You don't go to a lawyer because you use an app to solve it. Yeah, solid. Counter argument would be have you used a lawyer for that before? Or is that something that gets actually processable because you didn't even use a lawyer before? So you're creating market. But nevertheless, yes, people see this. And interestingly, the argument that comes often here is, I have asked a lawyer for legal advice, and I asked her and she gave me the advice, and it took her half an hour and she charged $300 for that. And I later asked the exact same question, ChatGPT, and I got the exact same answer with more content after 2 minutes, and it cost me nothing. So why would I ask my lawyer if I can get the exact same thing out of ChatGPT? Valid, but also biased, because you only say this because you asked the lawyer. So will you trust ChatGPT on this? Separate question, but that is an example for self-service stuff. And especially lawyers, ironically, who use AI-based tools like an AI assistant or even like horizontal solutions like Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT are actually convinced that these tools are pretty good and better than people think and that their job is endangered. So it's weird that the lawyers are the ones that are most afraid that what they're doing is not that special. If you're not a lawyer watching this, think about this for a second, right? Like it tells you something about the profession if the people who are doing it are actually sometimes thinking that what they're doing isn't that hard. I think honestly, this is more like the imposter syndrome of very smart people, frankly. And if they really think about what they're doing, it turns out it's actually quite complicated and there are many other things involved. But it's interesting to see that people have a very sober view on what their contribution to value is. After like the pie shrinking argument with the self-service argument, there are more arguments why the pie will shrink. The biggest one from the law firm perspective, of course, is that the partnership model will not hold. In other words, you're the partners in the firm, you have the associates who do the work, you charge their hours to the clients, you need more associates than you have partners. These associate hours have a fixed fee they come with in terms of costs, which is the salary of the associates. This salary you always have to pay independent of how much these people bill. If now their billable hours go down because you cannot have the efficiency of AI with the same amount of billables, that means that the model gets impacted and you probably have like, even if you have automation impacts of let's say 30 to 40%, that still means that your partner takeout rate is actually maybe at 50, 60% lower. So you get heavily impacted in what you can take out because of the fixed fee basis of the associates. Mark Cohn wrote an article about that. Other people commented on this. I know that Rainer Markford from Denton's commented on this. Like many people commented on this and had a discussion about that. And I think there is truth to that, so we can discuss that. But it assumes that this is happening though in a rate where the decline of requests is faster than the stuff lawyers can do at the firm through an expansion of services, through selling additional things and other stuff a lawyer can do in that scenario. Again, I see lawyers every day who have a project where they have a before and after scenario and they save hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the conversations are still about, I can sell more to the client, I can consult more, we can do more. There's still a positive vibe of, I want to do this and offer this to the market rather than I have to do it, I'm under pressure, if I don't do this, I lose the client. So it's bifurcated and it's unclear how this results and we're way too early to do this. So I'm just like summarizing the argument. Cost pressure argument that says it doesn't even matter if we use technology. It doesn't even matter if we're doing it self-service or if there's efficiency. Clients know AI is there. Clients put pressure on us. We have to do it. Possible. We will see how that plays. So these are basically the arguments. People say the pie is getting smaller. Let's talk about the arguments that are on the other side. Finally, what I learned by talking to people was also there are people thinking if the effects will be mild, and there are some people who think the effects are actually not existent, so nothing will change. And just for the sake of the argument, by listening to all these people, and because I'm a lawyer by heart and I can actually argue, I like to argue actually with people, I like to put myself into the position where I argued, maybe we'll have more lawyers in the future. And I just thought it would be fun to argue like that. And it turned out that it was a case I could defend. So I'm still not sure whether I actually believe this. But what I want to say is there are good arguments on this. So summary of the last 6 weeks of arguing with lawyers about the future of lawyers, taking the stand of we will be more lawyers in the future, not less. Argument number one, the pie is actually not shrinking, it's growing. This argument, nobody will win until we see the data. But what is true is that technology creates new tasks and new jobs. And this is something we can prove at least historically. So this argument is the only argument of all the arguments here that can actually have a valid data set of saying whatever technology was introduced to mankind created more jobs. That was the main argument against Osborne Fry, by the way. It was the main argument against the OECD study that technology will impact the way you work today, but your work is not static. It will change, emerge, and embrace new technologies, leverage new technologies, and hence not be impacted, in fact, grow. So there are exceptions to this. There are structural changes, there are geopolitical changes, there are like, whatever, tariffs, impacts, all these. You have people who lose their job because a coal mine gets closed and if you worked in a coal mine, you're maybe not becoming an Uber driver. Like maybe you're not becoming a computer scientist in your area. Like it's maybe not happening. So there are exceptions to this. But most of the time when technology came, the effects were slow enough for you to adjust to this and to embrace it. So this is a very boring argument because it just points to the past and says, look, the data's there. So I don't know if this can be an argument that we will actively measure because the effects are slow, but at least this is what we learned from the past. The pie is growing also not just because technology creates new problems and basically positively impacts the jobs. We see that the AI itself creates legal problems. I always joke about the fact that law firms until today have made more money consulting their clients on AI and on AI regulation and how to navigate it than they lost through the impact of AI. Currently, law firms made money on AI. And I think there is reason to believe that this will continue. So the problems AI creates, the IP of AI generated stuff, the IP of the application of vibe coding tools. There's like just in every aspect of life now more problems and more questions that are rising that create work. We are seeing some data from the vibe coding world where people are using those tools and are reporting, let's say, binary efficiency gains. Yes, there is efficiency, but also it creates more work, it's different work. It's unclear. So you could argue the pie is growing because AI creates more work. The access to justice increases, law becomes more accessible, people can use legal technologies easier. All of this is also true for the pie at large. The number one argument that came up in the last weeks was Jevons paradox. I had not heard about it before. Also, I'm not a mathematician, but the term came up in January. I thought about like, why did it come up in January? Like you can look at Google Trends, like nobody talks about Jevons paradox until January. You know why it came up? Because of DeepSeek. DeepSeek publishes their model and suddenly everybody freaks out about the reduced costs of LLM usage. DeepSeek was free and also on the commercial side much cheaper than the closed models from the Western world. And everybody discussed about how the reduced costs in the LLM usage will impact the access to this. And the funny bit about this is that people then brought the mathematical paradox of Jevons to play, who observed in the, I think about the costs of coal, that you, with the reduction of coal ovens in price and the basically combustion getting all easier, that this did not lead to coal producers and everybody involved in the value chain of coal burning having less revenue with the falling price, but in fact more because the number of units per consumption went up. In other words, Jevons paradox means if you can produce something at the lower cost than you did before, and this is significantly lower, there may actually, because of the lower cost, an increase in consumption that leads into a market increase. So bring this to lawyers. If legal advice gets cheaper, maybe more people will need legal advice. You're now going, yeah, really? Are we all like, do we want more legal advice and we're not like taking it? I don't know. But we have Jevons paradox in many areas. So the funny thing about this is, I know in-house teams don't wait to let people go and reduce teams dramatically. They just want to survive. They just want to navigate complexity. Their mantra is do more with the same, in brackets, team. They just want to get rid of the noise. And by the way, I want to add this as a note, prices are currently not going down. Yeah, clients push law firms to different pricing models, but the billable hour per se, as it's being used in the market, goes up. We have higher billable hours in some areas. This is not true for every lawyer, not in every team, but we have an increase in billable hours in many aspects. So there's an interesting divide happening. So when I watched this and I had all these discussions and then I had to basically argue the case of maybe we will be more lawyers, there's one story that somebody told me and I cannot recall who it was. And this is way back. We're talking like already like March or April in discussion. There's an interesting comparison that I learned from somebody and it has stuck with me and I have discussed it multiple times since then. It is the comparison of the introduction of the digital research databases from the legal publishers in the 1990s. In the year 2000, like 1995 to 2000, people introduced like Hein Online, Westlaw, Lexis, all those tools, Becker Online, Juris in Europe, a number of those. The tools were physical before. You had to go to the library and actually read a book, do a copy, and send it out. With the introduction of the digital tools, research got easier. And the people who told me that story told me how afraid they were to lose clients back then. Why? Because they thought the reason why the big corporate would use them as a law firm was, amongst others, the fact that they had a library. So the law firm would invest in a law firm library in the hundreds of thousands per year to have a big selection of books. And that would be their knowledge base. And they would go down to do research there and then go up and do a copy and send it to their client. And they thought that their clients were using the firm because they had the library and the client didn't. With the introduction of digital research, that was gone. No CapEx investment into a big library. You could basically just like log in online, do the research, and the corporate client could have done it on their own. They did, in fact, but the law firms didn't suffer. Like the introduction of online research did not change the relationship between clients and law firms, really. It probably did in some cases. It probably did for some lawyers, like I'm sure it did. But it didn't change the way the law firms provided value. So this example shows something that is true for technology often. It benefits the ones who use it exponentially. Technology often is accessible in a democratized way, but the way it plays and the way it affects is exponential. The printing press, it wasn't benefiting everybody in the world the same way. It benefited the smarter ones got even smarter. If you bring this into Gen AI, if you use Gen AI as a lawyer today, you will be better. The better ones get even much better. It creates a bit of a divide, in fact. So if you are a law firm that starts to roll out AI assistants, starts to get smart around AI, starts to buy stuff to actually test out things and build out use cases to automate, they will probably benefit through this more than the firm that doesn't do it, which gives them an exponential advantage. So, zooming further out, what I observed over the last weeks was that most lawyers actually do this. It's not new. Like most lawyers are now starting to get smart about technology, which brings me to the thought, if maybe the lawyers are the ones that are getting equipped, maybe they are the ones that are also able to basically defend their work and come up with new work and shape the legal world more than people who are not lawyers. In other words, maybe lawyers will be quite successful in creating illegal work with AI than they are without. So if you think the world is overly regulated, maybe lawyers with AI will be better in making it even more regulated. Maybe we will even have more regulation because we can write regulation faster. Maybe we will have more laws because we can create laws faster. I'm just making these up. I just want to say, tech in the hands of an expert will benefit the expert. And currently, the experts who are buying the tech are the lawyers. So we are not talking about this is where the world is getting equipped with AI, and here are the poor lawyers who don't have it and use paper and pens. It's the lawyers who buy the tech. We see it every day. My theory here is, and this is where I'm a little bit siding with the people who are like on the latter parts of the arguments, as you can tell. My theory is, if lawyers are learning about AI now, using it, leveraging it, I think there's a case to be made that the world will be run by more lawyers than it is now. I think there will be more lawyers being successful. Think about this. I think it's a funny thought, entertaining at least, to think that we're giving lawyers superpowers. Everybody who says, look, isn't AI giving you troubles because, it can do what a lawyer can do? Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe because AI, in fact, can do what a lawyer can do and lawyers can now get leveraged by this. This is actually benefiting the lawyers versus other professions are struggling to make sense of it. I like that a lot. How can we get the argument done? So I agreed with people to do two things. One, we agreed to look into data. What data can we find? For me, if AI will impact the legal work as we think it will, we will see it in some areas first. There's some canary in the coal mines. One, AI native law firms. If you are right, if you're the ones who say efficiency will impact pricing and that will turn law firms' business models upside down, if you think that, then obviously a firm that starts from scratch and being like 80-90% cheaper will win the game. So we will just have to watch which of the AI native law firms comes into the market and just kills everybody else because they are starting, right? The Crosbys, the tacit legals in the world, they must be the ones who actually then win. Let's see. Also, the ALSPs. I think the big turmoil is happening in the ALSPs because they're in the quadrant of high frequency, not very complex, or not very risky at least. This is where you go to outsource your work. In the ALSP quadrant, this is where the magic will happen. This is where the wave hits. It hits in a good and in a bad way. If you're an ALSP that can react to this, maybe you can do your work at scale, cheaper, faster, AI enabled. Maybe you get impacted by this because AI makes your job automatable and you can't charge hours for it anymore. So my canary in the coal mine is the ALSPs and the AI native firms. This is where I would look. This is where the data is. This is where we see what's happening. And we can do this on an almost like quarterly basis and check out how all our ALSP markets are moving. I think that's going to be a very interesting one. And this is something where we will definitely learn a lot. Number two, and this is like the other thing I agree with people, is let's do a regular check-in. So put out your calendar, mark your calendar in 1 year, 2026, July 24th, and let's just like write into the calendar, I want to catch up with Michael about his theory about the jobs in legal changing, and we will have a conversation about that. I'll be super curious to have that. Until then, have a great time. It was nice speaking to you. We will speak to you next week again, and until then, have a good time. Bye-bye.